Yes, welcome in. Badgers back from a 31-7 loss to Indiana. Number 2 Indiana. I think we always need to throw that in. Number 2 and undefeated off to their first 11-0 start in school history. So congratulations to the Hoosiers. The Badgers, though, put up a fight in the first half, Jesse. I certainly think we can say that. We can say that was a impressive first half effort from Wisconsin.
Absolutely. Obviously, it was a tremendous challenge going in. There's a reason why Wisconsin was a 4+ touchdown underdog, and we'll get into all of it. But that's an Indiana team that's playing great football. It was a sold-out stadium, and they've played even better at home than they have on the road. And yet, it was only a 10-7 Indiana lead at the half. So if you're looking for building blocks, and it's small victories, it's not always the big victory against a Washington. They can at least point to that first half and say, we competed with a college football playoff team and put a scare into them at least for 30 minutes of football.
Yeah, so I posted at halftime, truly impressed with what they're doing. They're winning the time of possession, they're limiting possessions, they're doing all that stuff. And then you get people coming back 6 hours later. How can you be impressed with 31-7? Not my fault that you just showed up. All right. We'll get into all of it, what went right, what went wrong, and get into your questions as well. Before we do, as always, we do have a YouTube channel, the Camp YouTube channel. Just go up, search for it, subscribe. We would appreciate it. And also, we have a Instagram that we post all both the camp and the swing pictures from games and interviews from players, and also obviously the shows as well. So go check that out, the camp on Instagram as well. And Jesse has his work up at Badger Connect. Well, you got what do you got going on up there?
Well, I have a recap from the Indiana game, which anybody watching already knows what happened, but a lot of stuff this week and next week. I'll just give a tease for our next Badger Bites. I know that you've been waiting on this one for a while.
It's coming.
Yeah, every Wednesday we do these videos, and I thought it would be just a brilliant idea as someone who's never wrestled before in my life to take on one of Wisconsin's wrestlers, 174-pounder Luke Condon. He's only a former California high school state champion and started every dual meet for the Badgers a year ago. So I strapped on the singlet. I looked like an idiot. I felt even worse by the time he completely kicked my ass. But in the interest of trying to create some content and something entertaining and something different, that's what you'll see on Wednesday. And obviously there's still 2 regular season games remaining for football. Basketball's getting going. Volleyball's about to go to the NCAA tournament. So there's a lot going on for the Badgers, and thus a lot going on over at Badger Connect. And I strongly encourage you to subscribe.
Yeah, get after it. BadgerConnect.com. All right. What went right for the Badgers in their trip to Bloomington? And again, that is a picture of Carter Smith, who for one half looked the part for a little bit.
Yeah, well, do you want to start on defense or offense?
Well, let's go offense and then into defense, because I thought the defense in the first half was fantastic, and yes. I thought for a large stretch of the game that they did the things that they can do, and then we also saw the weather also was good. So we'll get into the issues on the back end for the Badgers, but certainly what went right for them. We can start offensively and get to the defense.
Yeah, well, for a half, I think they did everything they possibly could given the limitations that they have. And we've talked in the last several weeks about Jeff Grimes, the offensive coordinator, and how clearly hamstrung he is and the ability to call a game. I thought for the first half, it was a brilliant offensive play calling game. And that's not to say that they were putting up 250 yards and scoring a bunch of points. But we knew the challenge. You're starting your 4th-string quarterback, at least going into the season. He was your 4th-string quarterback, true freshman. So the first true freshman starting quarterback Wisconsin has had since Jay Macias in 1991, which is remarkable.
Can I say that that's a stat that we both have loved talking about and using it? Because everyone was always like, a true freshman, just play him. And then we always got to be like, well, they haven't started one since 1991. And now that stat is out the window. We've been saying that for 10 years.
I've definitely been using it since at least 2019 when Graham Mertz got here. And obviously that situation was different because you had a guy named Jack Cohn putting up great numbers and staying relatively healthy. So you have that. Gideon Atuka's your starting running back. And at the start of the year, he's your 4th-string running back. You have Davis Heinzen, who was your left tackle to open the season at center. All these issues. But I felt like he called a great first half. The first drive didn't result in any points. Nathaniel Vakos missed that 44-yard field goal, but they had the ball for more than 7 minutes. They picked up 3 first downs. I thought they did a good job of trying to get Carter Smith comfortable. He had a shovel pass to Jackson Aker for 19 yards. He picked up a first down with his legs. It was a 3rd and 8, I think, and he got 9 yards out of it. So that was good. You mentioned the time of possession. They had the ball for more than 17 minutes, which is the absolute perfect way to try and stay with Indiana. Don't let them have the ball and maybe frustrate their defense by getting a handful of first downs. And of course, the touchdown pass was absolutely masterful. I mean, it's 4th and inches. Everybody in the stadium knows, not thinks, knows you're going to run the ball. And what do? They have this play action pass, and tight end Lance Mason is running wide open. And fortunately for the Badgers, Carter was able to put it up there and give him the room necessary to catch the ball. 45-yard touchdown pass. Everybody is shocked. So offensively, I thought that it was really a great game plan because they clearly weren't going to air the ball out with Carter. For as much as they've talked about wanting to take some shots down the field, I just don't know how realistic that was given the circumstances, given how good Indiana's defense was, given the fact that Carter doesn't have a lot of experience as a college player in that role. So they were able to get the ball to the edges. They were able to be creative. And I think Grimes, and we can get to the second half, but for the first half at least, deserves a ton of credit. And the players deserve a ton of credit for executing that plan because obviously the first drive is going to be scripted. I think that's generally how things are. But at a certain point, it's not a script. It's making sure you call the right thing in a given situation and having the players execute it. And in the end, they're only down 10-7 at the half, in part because Indiana's offense only had the ball for 4 series.
Yeah, it's impressive. You mentioned all the guys in different spots and all the different faces. I mean, I went back to the opening starting lineup. There are 3 guys that are in the same spot that they were in the first game. There's Joe Brunner, there's Lance Mason, there's Vinny Anthony. Those are the 3 guys. And obviously Jaden Ballard and Chris Brooks Jr. and Tretch, their wide receivers have generally been healthy. But other than that, it's been guys moving all over the place. And so, yes, they are working with a much, much different look. And the quarterback spot is obviously the one that stands out the most because he's your 4th different guy that has started a game this year, which is just insane. And you're right. I thought Jeff Grimes kept them on their heels for the first half of that game. There were just one step ahead. I mean, however, whatever cliche you want to use here, he was exactly what they needed to be. 17 minutes. The running game was working-ish. It was keeping them in 3rd and manageable most of the time. And there was a play that they had set up, that wide receiver screen to Vinny Anthony, that would have been a big play, perhaps even a touchdown, if the ball is just maybe 1 inch lower or if Vinny Anthony makes a great catch. Because there was the runway was clear. He was gone. He was going to on his way. So there were a couple big time play calls there from Jeff Grimes and the offense that really opened up. And I thought there were, again, as you said, they didn't put up a ton of yards, put up like 159 or something like that in the first half. It's right around 150 for the first half, which isn't great, but it's also exactly what they needed to do. And so, yes, I thought there were very good signs that Jeff Grimes kind of knew the situation that he was in, and he was calling a very solid game, a really good game, to be honest, against that type of opponent to open a half or to open a game, I guess.
Yeah, and I thought it was an interesting strategy that they really didn't utilize Carter as a runner much. No. When a week earlier he had 15 carries for 47 yards with the touchdown, and again, as I said during the week, that plan was different because I can't imagine there was much passing in the plan for Carter if he was going to get in the game. The fact that Danny O'Neal started indicated to me that either he wasn't going to play at all or he was just the emergency guy, which is what ultimately ended up happening. Well, very clearly now you had an entire week to prepare a plan, but he only ran the ball, like 3 times or something like that? Not very often. And maybe it's you want to save the quarterback because everyone's gotten hurt. I think that's got to be a factor in this because that's clearly one of Carter's greatest strengths. but they also didn't necessarily need to do it because they were able to get the ball to so many different people. How many sweeps did they run? How many different, I mean, and this is, I think, the second half, but like even the play to Lance Mason that he ends up being, it was like 3rd and 5 or 2nd and 5 or something like that. That was the only first down they got in the second half, but just small wrinkles and creative ways to get the ball to other people so you're not putting Carter in harm's way. Yeah, I
Yeah.
really thought it was a really good job by Jeff Grimes.
Yeah, 7 different guys carried the ball, getting to Tuka Tretch, Lance Mason, Darian Dupree, Carter, Vinny Anthony, Jackson Aker, and Tyra Henry, all credited with at least 1 carry. And they also had, I think it was 9 different guys catching a pass as well. So they certainly spread the ball around. Now, some of the carry thing, I think, who knows how many more carries Gideon Atuka would have gotten had he not gotten knocked out of the game. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. All good, at least on the physical aspect of it. And we'll see if it perhaps keeps him out next week or the week after. But that was good to see that he was on the team playing back home. Do we want to move over to the defense, or is there anything else offensively that stood out for you?
I mean, we have one half of football to talk about in the what went right category offensively. Yeah. So I think we pretty much covered it. I will say, obviously, this season in the totality has not been particularly successful to date. If I had to say the play of the year or the plays of the year, I mean, I would put that touchdown pass at the top. I know there have been a few others, maybe not at the top just because of the Washington upset. The Mason Post fumble recovery after he forced it is up there, but in terms
offensively,
in terms of sheer surprise value, that is right at the top, given the position they were in and like just how unforeseen that was. It really was as good as you can call in a moment like that.
Absolutely. Defensively, what went right?
It's interesting to say that I feel like the defense played reasonably well when Fernando Mendoza goes 22 for 24 with 299 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no interceptions. I mean, the notion you can have a quarterback who has done this on multiple occasions this year, has more touchdown passes than incompletions, tells you why he's a Heisman Trophy finalist. He set the Indiana
or will be.
What's that? Yeah, well, will be. Yes, Heisman Mendoza. Good name there. That's the nickname they're going with.
I did not. Was that on the telecast? I didn't see that.
It was good.
I can't turn the volume on those things.
I don't blame you, but he's got 30 touchdown passes, so he does that to a lot of people. Having said that, they did play reasonably well because of the challenge that Indiana presented. I thought they got after Indiana in a way that no team this season has. And you can look at it statistically. Indiana going into that game, so that's a 10-game sample size, had given up 10 sacks and 37 tackles for loss. So 2 sacks a game or 1 sack a game and 3.7 tackles for loss a game. Well, Wisconsin's defense got 5 sacks and 7 tackles for loss. Daryl Peterson played one of the best games he's played at Wisconsin. He had 2.5 sacks. He was tremendously disruptive. Mason Posta led the team with 12 tackles. He also got a sack, and that was a key sack because it was 3rd down, and it forced a punt. Charles Perkins got a couple TFLs in there. And again, we have not spoken often about the defensive line, but I thought they did a really good job. Deone Hill has 9 tackles. They just had so many different guys making plays. And that's not something that Indiana's had to deal with. So ultimately, yeah, Indiana had a ton of success passing the ball. And I know there was certainly discussion about how windy it was and whether that would impact Indiana's ability. Ultimately, it didn't. But Indiana didn't run the ball particularly well. They came in with a top 10 rushing offense. And so I think Wisconsin's defense does deserve some credit for generating pressure. I thought it was a continuation of what we've seen here in the last few weeks. And it hasn't always been perfect. And there's been 7 losses, but at least there are situations you can point to and say they were down 10-7 at the half against Michigan. They were down 10-7 at the half against Indiana. They were in the game against Washington when you got to halftime. It hasn't, again, happened every game. Oregon, they're down a score on the road. So I think the defense has made strides. And that's not to forget about the pass defense. Indiana has a bunch of playmakers and a great quarterback, but they did a lot of the things necessary to keep Wisconsin in the game. And I just think they deserve a lot of credit for that.
Agreed. That's 14 sacks in the last 3 weeks. They had 17 sacks all of last year. So I think that certainly stands out. Daryl Peterson, what did he have? 2.5 sacks
2.5
yesterday. That's more than he had in the last 26 games combined. He had 2 sacks in the last 26 games combined. So he's got that going for him. Wisconsin's pass rush certainly has not been something that we've talked a ton about before these last 3 games and last year, or really under Luke Fickell in general. But they're averaging 2.6 sacks per game this year. That'd be the most for them since 2021 when they were at 3 sacks a game. They don't. So they're getting after it now, and the TFLs certainly stand out for me too. They did what they needed to do in the first half to be in that game. And as again I said, it was a offensive and defensive effort to keep the ball out of Indiana's hands for extended periods, but and they weren't able to do that nearly as much as they probably wanted to in the second half. But Fernando Mendoza's really, really talented, and that offense is really talented. They averaged over 40 some odd a game, and Wisconsin, I think, kept them, I think it was like 14 under their average for the day. So, yes, the first half was exactly the type of game that you wanted them to play, and they did. And the ability to get after the quarterback and the ability to stop the run is something that we were talking about all offseason. Were they going to be able to do either of those this year? And they've stopped the run generally well this year. They hadn't necessarily gotten after the passer as much as we thought that they would be able to, but except for these last 3 games, which just also happen to be the best defensive games they've played this year against Big Ten opponents. Even again, acknowledging what Indiana did in the second half.
Yeah, I think it's the pressure that helps you feel a little bit better about this defensive performance, because there have been numerous occasions this season where it was, Wisconsin, at least statistically, was able to stop the run. And it was, well, how often did that team really need to run? Because the quarterback could stand back there and do whatever he wanted. I go back to the Alabama game in week 3. Alabama didn't have a bunch of rushing yards. They didn't need to, because Ty Simpson had felt like he could do whatever he wanted. And Alabama has great athletes, NFL caliber wide receivers, and they just did whatever they felt like. Even the Maryland game, which Maryland, as it turns out, not very good in Big Ten play this year. But I guess that was their moment for them. Didn't run the ball very well, but they had a freshman quarterback who was able to get the ball out to the edges. And it's happened several other instances. Ohio State didn't run the ball particularly well, but yet it didn't matter. This was at least a game where Indiana had to sweat it out for a little bit just because of that pressure. I mean, to go into the half and they're only up 10-7. I don't know what Kurt Cignetti said to the team at halftime. It clearly lit a fire, but
apparently it was nothing. Apparently it was just his normal halftime stuff, and didn't get all after him. Like didn't blow up, which is apparently something new. He's usually a guy that gets fiery at halftime, but yeah, you just have to give credit to Wisconsin defense for the way that they did. And again, you talk about getting pressure or not getting pressure. The last 2 weeks, the 2 quarterbacks that they've gotten after, and really go back to Oregon with Dante Moore, but really these last 2 weeks, 2 guys that have shown that they have the ability to take off and run and make issues for defenses with their feet. And that just did not happen outside of one run against Washington. It didn't happen these last 2 weeks. They were able to keep the quarterbacks contained and not let their feet beat them on a regular basis. I mean, it looked like Mason Posa knocked Mendoza. It looked like he was going to knock him out of that game. Like he was hurting the one time he took off, and it was Posa, right? Posa just slammed him in the ground. Or was that Heiberger?
Yeah, I don't know. I know Posa got the sack on him.
That was that sack where he then struggled to get up, and then went into the tent and had, he was able to come back. But
well, this reminds me of that. But the Posa hit on the running back and just boom, and everyone it's like, man, that's just a difference making.
I think that hurt Mason just as much as it hurt the running back.
Can't be honest. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. He was just doing the. Yeah.
But
yes, difference maker. And also, we'll also acknowledge, and I'll let you get to your thing in a second.
No.
We had a lot of questions after last week's game whether they could get Mason Posa, Cooper Catalano, and uh, Christian Allegro on the field at the same time. They did for one drive that Christian was able to. He didn't play a ton yesterday, but they got him on the field at the same time for one of those drives there in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think you're taking Cooper and Mason off the field at this point, at least not for very long.
Right, but they've been playing three linebackers at times these last few weeks, and I shouldn't even say these last few weeks. Much of the season, it's been Witt, and more recently, it's been Thomas Heiberger. But at least for one drive, they pushed Christian Allegro out there. So perhaps next year, that's something that you could look at if you want to get Christian Allegro back on the field. Though Thomas Heiberger is another guy that I think a lot of people are excited about too. But go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good. There's a lot of promise there at linebacker. And I think this is the stage of the season. Obviously now you're 3-7. You're not going to a bowl game. If you can find these pieces for the future, that matters a ton. And you can utilize these combinations and have some film to point to when you get to the offseason. This is just a really important stage for Wisconsin. I guess the other thing about what went right, at least defensively, is this is something that Mike Tressel talked about in fall camp, about how he felt like this defense was at least better positioned to, if something bad happened, come back from it. And they deserve some credit there too, because Indiana goes down on the first series and has the touchdown pass to Charlie Becker. There were a couple short third downs they converted, but basically did whatever they wanted. And it wasn't like, okay, the floodgates are open and Indiana's going to drop 60 like we saw them do against Illinois. So I thought, yeah, the defense deserves some credit, even if it did give up 300 plus passing yards.
Is there anything else that stands out for you in terms of what went right? You mentioned Charles Perkins. I think that's at least notable because he's one of the guys that could be back, or has another year to play, which is not necessarily the case for much of that defensive line. And so I think that's notable. You got him and Sebastian Cheeks and Dylan Johnson, and that's about it in terms of guys that have played a bunch this year. So I think that's good to see some of the flashes from him because we saw those in fall camp. But anything else you want to do before we go to what went wrong? 22 minutes. I mean, 22 minutes of what went right is pretty good for a 31-7 game.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump into what went wrong. Wisconsin, and I'll let you do your thing, but I just want to throw this stat at you. Wisconsin has gone 5 straight games throwing the ball for less than 100 yards for the first time in 36 years. Last time that happened was 1989. They were running a different offense back then. I don't know if you know that or not. I'm sure you do because you are well-schooled in the history of Wisconsin football. And trying to bring it back. That year, I believe they only threw for over 100 yards once against a Big Ten team, and that was, I believe, Michigan State in the finale. Otherwise, they 8 times they were under 100 yards, including 7 straight at one point.
There's no way or reason to sugarcoat it. The offense stinks. I mean, I know, we spent a lot of time talking about what a good job they did to stay in the game. And it's because the bar is so low. Like, can you just hold on to the ball? Can you do enough to get a touchdown and hope the defense keeps you in the game? That's where Wisconsin is. It's you said several weeks ago, you asked me that question of would Wisconsin end up averaging double figures in scoring? And I said unequivocally they would. And the answer is yes, because even if they're shut out in the last 2 games, I did the math, I believe they would average exactly 10 points a game. But they have not scored more than 14 points in games since week 2 against Middle Tennessee, which is the only quote unquote offensive explosion they had all year. And it was just in the second half. Because in week 1, it was 17-0 against Miami, Ohio, but it was 3-0 at the half, which much like in previous seasons should have been a precursor of things to come. They're averaging 12 points a game this season. That is on pace to be the worst Wisconsin has had since 1988 under Don Morton, when they averaged, I believe, 9.6 points per game. There was a year early in Barry's tenure where they were averaging 12.1 points per game. You're not going to get me to think this Wisconsin team is somehow going to eclipse that by scoring more than 12 in either of the next 2 games. Just not a lot of optimism there. Maybe they'll shock me and they'll drop 17 on Minnesota and get over the hump. Either way, this is based on the last 3 decades. We've seen a historically bad offense. And the second half, they had 23 total yards of offense. They had 1 first down. They're just so challenged right now. And we need to acknowledge all the injuries, certainly. Completely different team from the one they went into the season with, but they stink. I mean, they're doing everything they can just to pick up a handful of first downs. And one bad play will wreck everything. Now, that could be the case with a lot of teams. I mean, you have the sack on that first series where it must be a miscommunication between Davis Heinsohn and Colin Cubberly or whatever it was. But now it's you give up 7 yards on a sack and you have just no chance. But I don't know. I heard a lot of complaints, at least based, in our vacuum of social media about, oh, it's so conservative in the second half. And this is such a poor play calling from Jeff Grimes. And I guess I look at it like, what did you want him to do? You want him to air the ball out and give Carter a chance. I look at the interception and I say, this is why you don't do that, because you're trying to put a plan in place that can give you a chance, that can allow you to be successful. And this doesn't mean Carter can't develop into a more consistent passer down the road. He just started his first game ever in college, but that's a play that you can't make. You didn't see the defensive back. Tretch Kekahuna is running a route to the sideline. I think it's an out route, right? And it's picked off. And obviously there was a fumble that Carter had trying to run the ball. So that's 2 second half turnovers. That's something Carter didn't do in the first game. But you're just so hamstrung that you really can't do much. So it's a confluence of circumstances. But offensively, it's just been overall atrocious for a variety of reasons. And there's no getting around that.
No, absolutely not. There's no way to get around it. And again, at the end of the half where they did not take a timeout, there was like a minute and a half left, and they let the clock run down. And I shouldn't have been surprised that they did it, but I did say I'm a little surprised that they didn't take a timeout. Maybe they'll, offensively they are moving the ball, though it's in small increments and it's taking a little bit. But when you think about it, and then you look at the second half, you're like, all right, it makes a whole lot more sense why they did not take a timeout, because Carter Smith dropping back to throw the ball right now is not a strength of this offense. And who knows if it ever will be. But the interception is a very good illustration of why they run the offense they do with him at quarterback. And it's because he's just not that complete of a passer at this point. I mean, the defensive back read his eyes and when they're playing that type of coverage, he was able to just fall off the guy that he was covering and fall right into the zone where he wanted to throw the ball. And we saw Danny O'Neal do the exact same thing. We've seen a lot of guys, we've seen these guys do very similar things. So it's not where he's at this point. And yet when you're Wisconsin and you're a Big Ten team and you're a Division I Power 4 team, you need to be able to throw the ball. And I don't know, and maybe this is going to be the biggest question for them, and I know that there's a lot of people talking about it. I know that other people wrote about it. The biggest question is, what do you do this offseason? Do you think he can turn into a competent passer? Do you think he can be better than what he is now? And what's his ceiling versus having to go get somebody else to bring in next year? Because you cannot run this type of offense and the offense that Jeff Grimes wants to run with a guy that is struggling to throw the ball the way that Carter Smith does right now.
Well, I think you have to go to the transfer portal and explore.
Nobody wants to hear that, right?
No,
I get that.
But Luke Fickell is not getting year 5 with another year like this. For as much as there was discussion about what's going to happen and Chris McIntosh is backing him for another year, this is, you could say this should have happened already, but it's where the rubber meets the road. Either you're going to start to get some results or you're not, and you say this is not working. That's obviously, in Wisconsin's estimation, worst case scenario. But how do you create the change you want to see? It's got to start at quarterback. And as we've said, no guarantees, because no quarterback has been able to stay healthy. But I just think, well, how can you go into next season confident about what you have and say that something's going to be drastically different. And I'm not saying Carter can't be a really good quarterback, and it's not fair to put a stamp or a label on somebody who started one game and played in 2 games. But I also think you need to go into a season with a level of certainty or a little bit more confidence. And maybe you can say you can develop somebody over time. People may not want to hear, oh, go to the transfer portal for a 4th straight year. It's also the reality of the situation that one of the biggest hindrances to the offense has been poor quarterback play, consistently poor quarterback play. And so when we talk about them spending more money to either retain or go and get players, I said before, it's got to start at quarterback, and there's plenty of other positions, but you've got to evaluate it and see whether it's you've got the right guy and whether you can afford that guy and whether all the pieces fit into place. But I just don't know how you don't explore that, how you can stand pat and say what we have right now is working, because it's not.
Do you make over the entire room? And if you do go out and try and get somebody else, does that not indicate to the rest of the room that they're not the future at that spot? And so, I mean, that's the toughest thing about this is if you do go out and get somebody else. And again, the Billy Edwards situation and how that all has played out and will play out is irrelevant, I think, at this point. I know a lot of people think that he's sitting out to get his injury redshirt and then be able to play another year, and whether that's at Wisconsin or somewhere else, which is what I would assume, somewhere else. But do you want to make over the entire quarterback room again?
No. Yeah, the Billy Edwards Jr. situation is strange, just because of the lack of information. But let's just say, on the off chance it's you get a medical redshirt and you decide to stay, then I don't think you can go to the portal
Right.
unless you lose somebody. So I at least want to throw that out there. But I don't know how we can be confident in having everybody stick around in the era that we're in at quarterback. So if you lose someone, you need to bring somebody in. Ryan Hopkins right now is committed, and the early signing period is in a few weeks.
But he's no different than Carter Smith at this point.
Right. It's a young guy that I think you develop over time. So we'll see what they do. But this is the risk that any program runs at any position is when you go to the transfer portal, you risk alienating your current roster. At the same time, you have to evaluate whether you believe your current roster is good enough to get the job done. And if you don't believe that's the case, then you try and get somebody better. This is how it is everywhere. It's constantly trying to fight for your position, and either somebody who's still on the roster says, I accept that and I'm willing to fight for it, or I don't appreciate what you've done and I'm going to go somewhere else.
Yeah, and we've seen that at other positions, right? I think we saw that on the defensive line last year. Maybe you saw some guys leave that Wisconsin maybe probably didn't want anymore. They wanted bigger bodies, and it happens, and guys end up other places, and they are all upset, and they throw a fit. Kurt Neal, and you just do those are just things that happen. Quarterback is so different though, because it is the most important position in football, and it is the reason why, more so than anything else, if we talk about the offensive line, it's a problem. But the offensive line was a problem in 2015, and they still managed to put up points more than what they've done this year, right? And again, the 2015 schedule is slightly different than the schedule that they face this year. I certainly understand that, and I get it. Quarterback play has been the biggest hindrance to them putting up points, and it was yesterday too. And if you can't throw the ball, if you have 5 straight times not getting over 100 yards, and how many different quarterbacks started? 3 different quarterbacks probably started in that time. You're just not going to win enough games that way. Your punter can't be your leading passer in your one Big Ten win on a consistent basis. So you think portal?
I think they're just in a really difficult spot where I don't know whether they've got a choice. I mean, really.
I would agree. Yeah. Again, offensive line, not nearly good enough yesterday again, especially in the second half. I don't know what you want the wide receivers to do. I don't know what you want the tight ends to do. I don't know what you want the running backs to do. Getting Atuka, obviously, that was a very scary situation where he gets planted in the ground on a run that was going nowhere, and it was scary. And he was already dealing with the ankle injury, but he gets up or doesn't get up, but he gets taken off the field, and you just don't know what's going to happen. But a good thing he was back on the plane, so that was good positive out of that. But you're now down another running back, and Darian Dupree was the last one standing yesterday, at least in terms of the scholarship guys. And Katie Akamelli's, I think, he's done for the year, right? Or is he?
He's just listed as out, but
Yeah.
I mean they're so
There's
thin.
2 games. There's only 2 games left. So
yeah, the Darian Dupree one is interesting because on the TV broadcast they said the previous week he was on a pitch count, and the plan was not to just say he's full go this week. It was they were going to increase the role. Well, there was nobody left. There was Grover Bortolotti. So, yeah, they've just been decimated by injuries, obviously.
right. And what did they end up running for? It wasn't good. So either way, it's irrelevant. We can go in circles about this. The quarterback spot is the one that you have to think about. And as we sit here right now with 2 games left, and unless you see a major jump offensive, passing wise, you're concerned about that. And I don't know that you can go into next year with this group if this was the group that you're going to take forward. So I know it comes with going the portal route, but if you're able to get the question is, how much better can you get?
Well, we do not know the answer, but what you have to do is go and get one of the best guys available. Look at Indiana, for example. Okay, a year ago, they had Curtis Rourke, had a really good year. And what did you do? You got Mendoza from Cal, who very briefly, at least, was in the conversation at Wisconsin. But any quarterback who's really good is going to be in the conversation when you're a program trying to get someone like that.
Question.
And he's been great.
Go ahead. I was going to say, is there a brother of somebody that?
Yeah.
Is there a brother of a quarterback right now that is out there and that you want to bring in? Well, that kind of helps.
That he's got a brother who's the backup.
Yes, that had to have helped. That.
Yeah.
Come here and yes.
But I'm just saying, like, that's what you have to get. You have to get somebody who's proven. You have to have a lot of good fortune. That person is going to stay healthy, which Wisconsin hasn't had. But that's how you instantly elevate or maintain. If you're Indiana, have a really good year and then back it up. It's because you bring in somebody where you know what you have and he goes out and delivers immediately.
Yeah. So that's what went right, or excuse me, what went wrong offensively. Defensively in the second half, they still were able to get after him a little bit, but he's fantastic. The offensive line played slightly better. I thought they got after Bob Bostad's offensive line. I wasn't necessarily expecting that. I know they have some injuries, but I wasn't necessarily expecting that. The 5 sacks against Indiana, I expected them to kind of go downhill a little bit on Wisconsin defense, at least in the run game and hold up in the pass game. That didn't happen at all. But the secondary continues to be an issue, and was an issue that wasn't taken advantage of the 2 previous weeks, because I think the weather kind of played a bit of a role, and the wind was certainly a problem for some. It was not a problem necessarily for Fernando Mendoza in the second half, but Wisconsin just really, really has struggled all year against the pass, and we saw that again. They're down 2 starters without Preston Zachman, and yes, I will throw Nizer Forkerian in there as well. They're down 2 guys, and that's been a big hit. But they struggle in man coverage, and we saw that again. They fail sometimes to make plays, and when they have an opportunity in man coverage, and those were the big plays that Indiana had came in those situations.
Yeah,
nothing. All right.
Well, it's evident. They've gotten beaten too often on these big pass plays, so. Hasn't been good enough, but you can say that for a lot of areas all year.
Opinions or thoughts on Nathaniel Vacos?
Well, not good enough this year. I don't know. I mean, I know it was windy, but Indiana's kicker makes this field goal on that side of the field, not from 45 or 44. but
that 1 yard makes all the difference, Jesse. You never know.
Well, yeah, I don't know. My opinion is you have one job, make your field goal kicks. And it's easy for me to say I don't have to do it, but it hasn't been consistent enough.
He's 5 for 9 on the year now, 17 for 29 the last 2 years. That's 60%. That's not good enough. And they do have Gavin Lom sitting there. They always talked about this year, whichever one doesn't start would redshirt. That was the thought, right? Like whichever one doesn't win the job. And I would suggest that now that the redshirt is not something that, and maybe they promised him, I don't know. Maybe they said, this is what it's going to be throughout the entire year. We're going to give you the entire year, but that doesn't feel like big time college football to me. You pick the guy that's going to give you the best chance no matter what. And at this point, the redshirt doesn't matter. So a little surprised that he hasn't gotten a chance, because we saw him in fall camp and there was nothing really separating either of them, at least in that. And it's proven that Nathaniel Vakos in the game is not the same kicker that he is in practice.
Yeah. Fair.
All right. Let's jump into, is there anything else that you want to talk about what went wrong?
Nah. Wisconsin covered. Is that what went right? It's what went right for me. It's not for you.
So disappointing. So disappointing. They had so many opportunities to score that next touchdown. I was on pins and needles hoping that they were going to break off a long one there
Good teams
on that
win,
last
great
drive.
teams cover.
It did not happen. Yeah, kind of like Oregon on Friday night. PJ Fleck, how you doing? 42-13, as projected or as predicted, I guess. For those wondering, we both went 3-4 this week. Jesse still has a 2-game lead with 2 weeks to go in the regular season. I'll remind everyone that if we get to the end of the regular season and it is not in my favor, we will continue on, which is the benefit of being the one that sets that stuff up. So, all right, let's jump into some listener questions here. It is likely that Melvin, and this isn't even really a question, but Chris says it's likely that Melvin Gordon will have gained more yards in a single game than the top Badger rusher will gain for this season this year. Currently, Jones at 300 yards, he's out for the year, and then Atuka at 223, almost a guarantee. Yes,
I would think so. Yeah. Well, I was wrong about that one. Swing and a miss.
What did you say?
I probably said that I thought Dylan Jones would rush for 1,000 yards. Boy, was I wrong about this offense and the ability to do anything of consequence consistently.
Our over-unders next year, like over-under 400 yards for a running back. And then I might take the under. We'll see.
See what the roster looks like.
Lucas says, and this is actually, I saw this as well, and I thought it was an interesting comment because you covered this guy as well. Mike Lucas from the Cap Times said that Carter Smith reminds him of Kurt Phillips with good knees. Still trying to figure out if that is a compliment. Thoughts on the comparison, whether or not it is a compliment. For anybody that doesn't remember, Kurt Phillips was a fantastic high school quarterback. I think he held the record, ended up he might have thrown for more yards in Tennessee football history than anybody else, but he also ran for a ton of yards at in Tennessee high school football. Got to Wisconsin. Him and Scott Tolzien actually sharing time to start the 2009 season. Kurt Phillips was coming off, I think, the first of his torn ACLs, but he tore his ACL a bunch. And by the time that he actually got an opportunity to play was 2012, was not the same quarterback.
Yeah, by the time I got here, Kurt was a shell of himself because he'd had, I think, 3 ACL tears.
Yeah.
I got here in 2011 and he didn't play that year. And so by 2012, there was not much mobility and they didn't ask him to do a ton. They also had some really good running backs that he could hand the ball off to. You could win games with a quarterback throwing for 80 yards. Is that a compliment? I'm assuming that's coming out of high school. I don't know. I do think Carter had a couple throws that were just tremendously impressive. It's not being able to do that consistently. I mean, his most impressive throw didn't even go for a first down or anything, but he rolled out of the pocket, threw across his body, and hit Eugene Hilton Jr. And it's like, those are the moments that you go, oh, look at that athleticism, get him out on the run, have him do those kinds of plays. But there's not enough consistency, and there's not the ability to just stand back there in the pocket and take a deep shot right now. But he's played in 2 games. There's obviously a lot of tools to work with. I just don't know how long you need, or how long it will take him to develop into a guy that you feel like you know what you're going to get, and you're going to have a chance to win some of these big games. We'll see. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough spot for him to be in, but I don't know what to make of that comparison.
Yeah, I think of the first starts of some other guys that were not impressive that ended up being good players, and the most recent one would be certainly Jack Cohn against Northwestern, and I think that was 2018, and he was not good, and that offense was not good that day. Later on, though, against Purdue, he came back and had a couple of big-time throws in a win that they won in overtime. I don't know that that's who Carter is.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't know that that's what this offense is, largely because they don't have a Jonathan Taylor that can run for 323 yards in a game. Like Jonathan Taylor, I mean, you can make the argument that you don't even need to go to Melvin Gordon. You could just go to Jonathan Taylor and say 323 and say no one's going to have more than that. So either way. John said whether it's a compliment or not, I don't know. Who knows? Kurt Phillips was never going to be a great passer, whether his knees were good or not. But his legs gave him just so much more juice. He was one of the first 4-star guys they got.
Yeah.
So, John says, I'd say I was pleasantly surprised at half. The defense did about as much as they could, but clearly need a passer. Is that the biggest offseason need? I feel like we've said it already is. Has the team gained some respect back the last 2 games to give us some hope?
Well, gain some respect back from whom? Fan base?
I think the fan base. I mean, I think fans. I don't know that the national people are talking about it.
Yeah,
because no one's talking about 10-7. They're talking about 31-7.
Yeah. Well, so I'll take this question as from the fans. I think this is what you needed to show in November, and we knew the results weren't going to be perfect. I mean, you're a 2-6 football team going into the month. Can you be competent enough to keep it competitive? That's where the bar is. I've said for several weeks, the bar is so low. It's as low as it's been here in decades. But you did beat Washington. So Luke Fickell got his first signature win. They beat a ranked team for the first time in 4 years. And you went on the road. And for a half plus, you played respectable football against one of the best teams in the country. Now, can they carry this forward at home against Illinois? Can they do that on the road against Minnesota to close the season? I think those will dictate to a degree how you feel going into year 4. Was there enough progress made? But yeah, these 2 weeks have been tremendously important because you're also coming off that stretch where you didn't score for 100 million years and you got shut out in those losses against Iowa and Ohio State. So being competitive matters.
I think this is kind of a combo question. Corey says, how is this team supposed to move the ball the next 2 weeks if Atuka is out? And also, Greg says, will we even recognize the running back room next year aside from Atuka? He says he could see Dupree, Jones, and Yakameli's out of eligibility, so he would move on anyways. But Dupree and Jones moving on.
It's always tough to speculate about who's going to go to the portal. We've been right sometimes, we've been wrong sometimes, but nothing will surprise me. And it may depend on what happens in this recruiting class. Obviously, they've got they've got 2 commitments. They've got Quantavius Wiggins, who just flipped from FIU, and the big one is Amari Latimer, and what's he going to do when the early signing period arrives? If you bring him in, you're looking at him potentially as the future. So yeah. I can see certainly change in the running back room. But the other question, I mean, what was the other question?
Well, the other question was, how do they move the ball the next 2 weeks with Atuka out?
How have they tried to move the ball for the last 7 games? I don't think the answer will be not very effectively. If Darian Dupree is healthy enough to go, then you give him the lion's share of the carries. And if nobody else is, then it's maybe you move Jackson Aker into more of that running back role. He can do a lot of different things. You also have a Grover Bortolotti, but whoever they've put out there, they haven't been able to effectively pass the ball. They haven't run the ball very well all year. I mean, 3 yards a carry or whatever it's been. So I don't have any reason to believe that's going to change. And I said this when I was doing my, 3 keys and prediction for the Indiana game. I was like, even if Wisconsin's defense plays reasonably well, there's just not enough offense for Wisconsin to keep pace or have any real chance. That's how I
Right.
feel pretty much the rest of the way.
Well, and again, that's the case with Illinois too. Like Illinois' offense puts up can put up some points. Their defense has been, I wouldn't say a liability by any stretch, but certainly not at the level that they probably thought it was going to be at. And you've also got the Brett Bielema factor, the Aaron Henry factor. You've got there's a lot playing. I mean, you got the 3 Badgers that are playing for Illinois right now, right? With James Thompson Jr. and Kurt Neal and Leon Lowry. And those are, I guess those would be storylines, but we'll see. We'll see. Ryan says, overreaction or no, Badgers desperately need an experienced and proven quarterback coach next season.
I don't.
That's tough, I know.
I don't know. That's a really hard question. Like, I like Kenny Guyton, but I'm not in the room and I don't know what kind of conversations he's having. I'll say it's an overreaction unless there's a quarterback whisperer out there, but I don't know who you could bring in that could change what's happened, that you've had to have 4 quarterbacks start and they've had 4 quarterbacks throw at least 10 passes in the season for the first time since 1956. I think that's an overreaction. You need the quarterback. You need the guy. That's what you need.
Nate, this might be easy or tough. We'll see. Name 5 young building blocks on each side of the ball that Fickell and company need to focus on retaining for next year.
All right. Well, it's easier to start defensively because you can say Mason Post and Cooper Catalano, which I will say in the story that I wrote last week, according to Cooper's dad, they've apparently already signed a lease for an apartment next year. I mean, they have talked like being here long term. So I feel like you're going to see those guys.
The only thing that makes me think of is Connor Esigian trying to get rid of his lease.
Yeah.
Like when he left for Nebraska, him trying to get rid of his lease and being like, Nebraska can't do this for you. He's like selling it on IG and selling it on Twitter. Like,
yeah.
Oh God, that should have been part of the package. Like when you went to Nebraska, they should be like, we'll also take care of your lease. And they did not.
I mean, those 2 stand out. Tommy Heiberger,
Emilio
Agard. That's 4 right there. There's probably young guys. Go ahead.
Yeah, like a Jalen Williams, like that we haven't actually seen.
That's what I was going to say. There's young guys we haven't seen, but you could say could be the building blocks. I think it's probably easier to identify on defense. On offense, it's just been so putrid. But Eugene Hilton Jr., I'll start there. He doesn't have a ton of catches, but we've talked about it since he got here. I've loved what I've seen from him and the opportunities that he gets.
Yeah.
Man.
Like the 2 offensive linemen. Kevin
right?
Haywood, Emerson Mandel, Colin Cubberly, Gideon Atuka. That'd be my 5. And again, I think you try and do everything you possibly can to keep a guy who's a true freshman at quarterback and try and develop him
100%.
And so Carter Smith, I think, would be a part of that as well, even though we haven't seen him be able to have a ton of success throwing the ball.
Yeah. Again, it's always a tricky proposition to try and sell long-term to a guy if you then go out and essentially recruit someone above them by going to the transfer portal. It's going to be a fascinating offseason, without question. When that January transfer portal window opens, there's going to be significant changes at Wisconsin.
Yeah, a couple more here. Kevin says, last 2.5 games, the Badgers have seemed dramatically more competent than they did the last 2.5 seasons. How is that possible? What do you think has changed?
I mean, part of me would like to say that the bar was so low, but well, defensively, I have to start there. They do seem to have more confidence. They do seem to have more playmaking ability, and it's no coincidence, perhaps, that this is Mason Post and Cooper Catalano, and those kinds of guys are getting a lot of run. So there's that. Offensively, I I can't say a lot has changed. I mean, again, you're talking about games where they finish with 7 points, 13 points, and 7 points. So I think it's defensively the ability to help carry a team for long stretches.
I think competency, is how competent are they to keep games closer than they were in the previous, there haven't been nearly as many penalties. That's been, I think, big thing. And young guys are getting opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Gideon Atuk has gotten an opportunity. And I think that has looked different offensively. Richard says, is the conservative play calling a directive from Fickle? If his seat is safe, why does he care about the margin of victory?
Look, Luke Fickell is a defensive guy. I think when he hires an offensive coordinator, yes, there's certainly more collaboration since Jeff Grimes got here than when Phil Longo was here. But to me, this is Jeff Grimes coming up with the plan. That's why you hired him. I don't know that anybody who's paying attention knows the circumstances Wisconsin faces offensively and the challenges. So you're trying to put together a plan that's going to help keep your team in the game. So I don't think this is some directive from the head coach. I think they're all looking at this and realizing, like, this is what we have. This is what we need to do just to stay in the game.
Last one here. Badger says, what's actually going to change with more money? I have a hard time believing Mendoza starting for Wisconsin would have resulted in a win today. Thought the players fought hard otherwise, but there are no moral victories. I would push back on that.
Yeah. Oh, Heisman Trophy. Yeah, yes, you are, because there are other personnel that help you, but
switch quarterbacks and
right.
I would feel pretty good about Wisconsin's chances of winning that game.
What's going to change is the personnel. How much are they willing to spend? What can they go out and get? That matters a lot. Those are the guys on the field that are going to win you the games. So if you can go and get a Mendoza type, I think your fortunes will change significantly.
Yeah. Again, I don't know that is going to be the case, because why would a Mendoza type want to come to Wisconsin at this point?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Johnny Manziel.
But how much more can you pay somebody over and above?
Yes.
To make them want to come to Wisconsin and play with the team that has won 8 games in the last 2 years and is on pace for its most losses in 30 plus. I think that is a rather significant, that is what they're gonna have to fight with. That's what they're fighting with. Like, all the top quarterbacks, yes, they want the money, but they also want a chance to prove that they are good enough for the next level. And I think that's really tough. That Wisconsin, that's an uphill battle Wisconsin's going to be fighting. So We'll see. We shall see. We'll be back on Tuesday. Look ahead to Brett Bielema's return to Madison for a second time, and Luke Fickell hoping it goes much better than it did for Paul Christ that week. All right, Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from Badger Connect. You've been listening to The Camp.